David stared at the pile of dirty dishes in his kitchen sink. 3 weeks had passed since he last did them properly. Empty pizza boxes sat stacked on his dining table, and his laundry basket overflowed like a small mountain of forgotten clothes. His house felt bigger and emptier every day 6 months ago. He lived here with his wife and 2 kids. The house was always messy back then, but it was a good kind of messy. Toys scattered around, drawings stuck on the fridge, and the sound of laughter echoing through every room. Now the silence was so thick he could almost touch it. David worked from home as a computer programmer. He spent most of his days sitting at his desk, writing code and attending video meetings. When work ended, he would look around his house and feel completely lost. Where do you even start when everything needs fixing? His sister called him last Tuesday. "David, you need help," she said during their phone conversation. "I came by yesterday and your place looks like a disaster zone. You can't live like this forever." She was right, of course. David knew he was drowning in his own mess, but hiring someone felt like admitting defeat, like saying he couldn't handle his own life anymore. But as he looked at his reflection in the bathroom mirror that morning, he barely recognized himself. His hair was longer than usual, his clothes wrinkled, and dark circles hung under his eyes like permanent shadows. That afternoon, David searched online for house cleaning services. Most of the websites looked the same, smiling people in matching uniforms, before and after photos, customer reviews talking about reliability and fair prices. But one website caught his attention. It was simple, almost plain, with just a phone number and the words "Specialized Domestic Solutions." "We find the right fit for unique situations." Something about those words spoke to him. His situation did feel unique. He wasn't just looking for someone to clean his house. He needed someone who could help him figure out how to live in this space again. David called the number. A woman answered on the second ring. Her voice was calm and professional, but somehow warm at the same time. "Hello, this is Specialized Domestic Solutions. How can we help you today?" "I need someone to help with housework," David said, feeling awkward. "My house is, well, it's pretty bad right now." "Can you tell me a bit about your situation?" the woman asked. "This helps us match you with the right person." David found himself talking more than he expected. He told her about the divorce, about working from home, about feeling completely overwhelmed by simple daily tasks. The woman listened without interrupting, making small sounds of understanding. "I think we have someone who might be perfect for you," she said finally. Her name is Elena. She has experience with people going through difficult transitions. Would tomorrow morning work for an interview? The next morning, David spent an hour trying to make his living room look presentable. He moved the pizza boxes to the kitchen, picked up scattered papers, and opened the windows to let in fresh air. At exactly 10 o'clock, the doorbell rang. David opened the door and felt his breath catch for a moment. Elena stood on his doorstep, and something about her presence immediately made him feel calmer. She appeared to be in her early 30s. With dark hair pulled back neatly and eyes that seemed to notice everything at once. She wore simple clothes, dark pants, and a white shirt, but carried herself with a confidence that made her seem almost elegant. "Hello, David," she said, extending her hand for a handshake. Her voice had a slight accent he couldn't identify. "I'm Elena. Thank you for considering me for this position." They sat in his living room, and Elena asked him questions that seemed to go deeper than typical job interview questions. She wanted to know about his daily routine, what kinds of meals he enjoyed, how he liked his space organized. But she also asked about his mood patterns, what time of day he felt most productive, and what small things made him feel comfortable in his own home. "I notice you have a piano in the corner," Elena said, gesturing toward the dusty instrument. "Do you play?" "I used to," David admitted. "Haven't touched it since everything changed." Elena nodded as if she understood completely. "Sometimes when our lives change dramatically, we abandon things that once brought us joy. But those things are still part of who we are." David hired her on the spot. Something about Elena made him feel like she actually saw him as a person, not just another client who needed his house cleaned. Elena started work the following Monday. David was amazed by how quickly she seemed to understand his needs. She worked quietly while he was in meetings, somehow knowing exactly when to vacuum and when to stay away from his office area. She prepared simple lunches that were exactly what he was craving, even though he never told her what he wanted to eat. By the end of the first week, David's house looked better than it had in months. But more importantly, it felt like a home again. Elena had a way of arranging things that made every room feel welcoming. She placed books within easy reach of his favorite chair, kept fresh flowers on the kitchen table, and somehow made sure his coffee was always perfect temperature when he took breaks from work. "How did you know I like my coffee with just a tiny bit of cream?" David asked one afternoon. Elena smiled mysteriously. "I pay attention," she said simply. There were other small things David began to notice. Elena never seemed rushed, even when she was accomplishing an incredible amount of work. She moved through his house with a grace that made her seem almost like she was floating. In her cleaning supplies, David never saw her bring them in or take them out, but his house always sparkled after she worked, most remarkably. Elena seemed to anticipate his emotional needs. On days when David felt particularly sad or lonely, she would leave small touches around the house, a favorite book placed where he would find it, music playing softly from the speakers he forgot he owned, or a warm meal ready just when he needed comfort food most. After 3 weeks, David realized something important had changed. For the first time since his divorce, he actually looked forward to being in his house. The crushing loneliness that had been his constant companion was still there, but it felt manageable now. Elena's presence, even when she wasn't actively working, had filled his home with a kind of peaceful energy he couldn't quite explain. One evening, as Elena was finishing her work for the day, David found the courage to ask her a question that had been bothering him. "Elena, can I ask you something? Your references were amazing, but I've never actually seen you work for anyone else. Have you been doing this kind of work for a long time?" Elena paused in her cleaning and looked at him directly. For just a moment, David could have sworn her eyes reflected light in a way that seemed impossible. But when he blinked, she just looked like herself again. "I've been helping people for longer than you might imagine," she said softly. "But every situation is different. Every person needs something unique." That night, David went to bed in a house that felt truly clean and organized for the first time in months. As he drifted off to sleep, he could have sworn he heard Elena moving around downstairs, even though he was certain she had left hours ago. But instead of feeling concerned, he felt safe and cared for in a way he hadn't experienced since childhood. Something extraordinary was happening in his ordinary life, and David was just beginning to realize that Elena might be much more than just an exceptional housekeeper. David woke up from the most vivid dream he had ever experienced. In the dream, he was standing in his backyard, but it wasn't his backyard anymore. The grass glowed with a soft blue light, and the trees reached toward a sky filled with 2 moons. Elena was there with him, but she looked different. Her skin had a gentle shimmer, and when she spoke, her voice echoed like music. "You don't have to be afraid," she had said in the dream. "Some connections go beyond what humans usually understand." David sat up in bed, his heart beating fast. The dream felt so real that he could still smell the strange flowers that had been blooming in that otherworldly garden. He looked at his bedside clock to 6:30 a.m. Elena wouldn't arrive for another 2 hours. But as David walked to his bathroom, he stopped in shock. His bedroom was completely clean. The pile of clothes he had left on his chair was gone. His desk was organized. Even his bed was made, even though he had just gotten out of it. David was certain his room had been messy when he went to sleep. He walked downstairs, and his confusion grew deeper. His entire house was spotless. The kitchen counters gleamed, fresh coffee was brewing in his coffee maker, and warm pancakes sat on a plate at his dining table. A small note lay beside the plate in Elena's handwriting. "Thought you might enjoy a good breakfast today. See you at 8:30. Elena. David checked every door and window. Everything was locked, exactly as he had left it the night before. His security system showed no record of anyone entering or leaving. Yet someone had clearly been in his house, working while he slept. When Ellen arrived at her usual time, David was waiting for her with questions. "Elena, did you come here early this morning?" he asked, trying to keep his voice casual. She looked at him with those deep, thoughtful eyes. "I arrived at our usual time," she said simply. "Why do you ask?" David explained about waking up to a clean house and fresh breakfast. Elena listened without seeming surprised. "Perhaps you cleaned more than you remember last night," she suggested. "Sometimes when people are very tired, they do things and forget about them later." David knew this wasn't true, but Elena's calm response made him doubt his own memory. Maybe he was more stressed than he realized. Maybe his mind was playing tricks on him. Over the next few days, strange things continued to happen. David would go to bed with dishes in the sink and wake up to a spotless kitchen. His laundry would be clean and folded before he remembered putting it in the washing machine. Books he had been meaning to read would appear on his nightstand, opened to exactly the page he would find most interesting. But the dreams were the strangest part. Every night, David dreamed of impossible places with Elena. They walked through forests where the trees had silver leaves that sang in the wind. They sat by lakes that reflected not the sky above, but glimpses of distant stars and planets. In these dreams, Elena would tell him things about the universe, about connections between living beings, about loneliness being a signal that travels across vast distances. "Every lonely heart sends out a call," Dream Elena would say. Most of the time, only other humans hear these calls. But sometimes, the call reaches further than anyone expects. David started waking up with knowledge he didn't remember learning. He found himself understanding concepts about astronomy and physics that he had never studied. He could identify constellations he had never seen before and felt a strange longing to look up at the night sky. One evening, David decided to test his suspicions. He made a big mess in his living room before going to bed. He scattered papers everywhere, left dirty dishes on every surface, and even knocked over a plant, leaving soil on his carpet. Then he set his phone to record video all night long. That night, David dreamed he was floating in space, surrounded by points of light that pulsed like heartbeats. Elena was there beside him, and in the dream, she wasn't human at all. She was made of starlight and energy, beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with physical appearance. "You're starting to understand," she said in the dream. "The connection between us isn't ordinary. It's something that happens very rarely when a human heart calls out with enough loneliness to reach across the stars." When David woke up, his living room was perfect again. Every paper was organized. Every dish was clean, and even the plant was replanted with fresh soil. But when he checked his phone, the video showed only David sleeping peacefully in his bed all night long. The camera had recorded nothing unusual happening in his living room. David felt like he was losing his mind. The evidence was impossible to ignore, but it was also impossible to believe. How could Elena be cleaning his house without showing up on camera? How could she be in his dreams every night when dreams were supposed to be private thoughts from his own mind? He started paying closer attention to Elena during her regular work hours. What he noticed made him even more confused. Elena never seemed to get tired. Even after hours of physical work, she never ate or drank anything while she was at his house. Her skin always looked perfect, like she had some kind of natural glow from within. Most strange of all, Elena seemed to know things about David that he had never told her. She would prepare his favorite childhood meal on days when he felt particularly sad. She would play music that matched his exact mood, even songs he had never heard before but somehow loved immediately. She would organize his belongings in ways that felt perfect, even though she had never asked how he preferred things arranged. One afternoon, David worked up the courage to ask Elena directly about these mysteries. "Elena, can I ask you something personal?" he began, feeling nervous. "Sometimes I feel like you know me better than people who have known me for years. How do you always know exactly what I need?" Elena stopped her work and turned to face him. For a moment, her expression was completely serious, almost sad. "Some people are more connected to the world around them than others," she said carefully. I've always been good at sensing what people need, even when they don't ask for it directly. But how do you know about my childhood favorite foods? How? Do you know what music I like when I've never told you? Elena was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than usual. David, have you ever felt like you were truly alone in the universe? Not just lonely for human company, but alone in a much deeper way? The question caught David off guard. Yes, he admitted. Especially since my divorce, sometimes I feel like I'm the only person in the world who thinks and feels the way I do. Elena nodded slowly. That feeling, that deep loneliness, it creates something like a signal. Most people never experience loneliness profound enough to send such a signal. But when someone does, that signal can travel much further than they realize. David stared at her, not understanding, but feeling like he was on the edge of a truth that would change everything. What are you trying to tell me, Elena? She looked at him with eyes that seemed to hold depths of knowledge he couldn't imagine. I'm trying to tell you that you're not as alone as you think you are, and that sometimes, when someone calls out across the darkness, someone else might hear them and decide to answer. That night, David lay in bed wondering if he was falling in love with his housekeeper or losing his grip on reality. Maybe both things could be true at the same time. David couldn't sleep that night. Elena's words kept replaying in his mind like a song he couldn't stop humming. She was willing to give up everything, her immortal life, her connection to her own people, her very nature, just to stay with him. The weight of that decision felt heavier than anything he had ever carried. He walked to his kitchen at 3 in the morning and found Elena sitting at his dining table, looking out the window at the stars. In the moonlight, her skin had that gentle glow he was beginning to recognize as her true nature showing through her human form. Can't sleep either? David asked, sitting down across from her. Elena turned to look at him, and David saw something in her eyes he had never noticed before. She looked tired, not physically, but in a deeper way, as if maintaining her human form was becoming more difficult. I've been thinking about what I told you, Elena said softly. I realize how unfair it is to put such a big decision on your shoulders. This isn't just about what you want. It's about what's right for both of us. David reached across the table and took her hand. Her skin felt cooler than usual, and he noticed her fingers seemed slightly translucent in the moonlight. Elena, are you okay? You look different tonight. She smiled sadly. The transformation is accelerating. The more emotionally connected I become to you, the faster I lose my original abilities. Look. Elena held up her other hand and tried to make it glow the way David had seen before. Instead of the bright silver light he expected, only a faint shimmer appeared for a few seconds before disappearing completely. A month ago, I could have healed a broken bone with a touch, Elena explained. Last week, I could still move through your house without making any sound. Tonight, I walked down your stairs, and they creak just like they do when you walk on them. David felt a mix of wonder and worry. Does it hurt, becoming human? It doesn't hurt exactly, Elena said, considering the question carefully. But it's strange. I'm starting to feel things I've never experienced before. Yesterday I felt hungry for the first time in my existence. This morning I woke up from a dream, something that never happened to my people. And right now, I'm feeling something I think humans call anxiety. Anxiety about what? Elena was quiet for a long moment, staring at their joined hands. I'm anxious that I'm being selfish. My people sent me here to help you, to answer your call for companionship. But now I realize I want to stay not just to help you, but because I've never been happier than I am in this form, in this life, with you. David felt his heart swell with an emotion so strong it almost took his breath away. Elena, that's not selfish. That's love. The word hung in the air between them like something sacred. Elena looked up at him with eyes that were infinitely more human than they had been weeks ago. Is that what this feeling is? She asked. This sense that your happiness matters more to me than my own existence? This need to be near you, to take care of you, to share experiences with you? Yes, David said, laughing despite the seriousness of the moment. That's exactly what love is. Over the next few days, David watched Elena's transformation continue. She started eating small meals, claiming she was curious about human food. She began taking short naps in the afternoon, curled up on his couch like a cat in a sunny spot. Most remarkably, she started expressing opinions and preferences about things that had nothing to do with her work. I don't like horror movies, she announced one evening when David was browsing through streaming options. They make me feel uneasy in a way I don't understand. That's called being scared, David explained, delighted by her reaction. Most humans don't enjoy feeling scared on purpose either. But the changes weren't all positive. Elena was losing abilities that had made her an extraordinary caretaker. She could no longer anticipate David's needs with perfect accuracy. She got tired after long days of cleaning. She even made small mistakes, like forgetting to water his plants or burning toast because she got distracted. I'm becoming ordinary, Elena said one afternoon, sounding frustrated with herself. I used to be able to do everything perfectly. Now I'm just human, Elena, David said, pulling her into a hug. You could never be ordinary, and being human isn't a downgrade. It's just different. But David could see that Elena was struggling with more than just physical changes. One evening, he found her standing in his backyard, staring up at the night sky with tears streaming down her face. What's wrong? David asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. I can't hear them anymore, Elena whispered. My people. For my entire existence, I could feel their presence, hear their thoughts, know that I was connected to something vast and eternal. But now there's only silence. David felt a stab of guilt so sharp it made him gasp. Elena, I'm so sorry. I never wanted to take that away from you. She turned in his arms to face him. You didn't take anything away from me, David. I chose this. But choosing something doesn't mean it's not scary. That weekend, Elena showed David something that changed everything. She took him to his backyard late at night and placed her hands on the ground. I want to show you what I'm giving up, she said, and what I'm gaining. For a moment, nothing happened. Then slowly, David began to see his familiar backyard through Elena's eyes. The grass glowed with a soft energy. The trees pulsed with life force. The very air shimmered with connections between all living things. It was beautiful beyond description, like seeing the world through the eyes of pure love. This is how my people see everything, Elena explained. We see the connections between all forms of life, the energy that flows through the universe. The way every living thing is part of one great pattern. It's incredible, David breathed, watching flowers bloom in fast-forward motion and seeing streams of light connecting every blade of grass. But watch, Elena said. As David watched, the magical vision began to fade. The connections became dimmer, the energy less visible, until finally he was seeing just his ordinary backyard again. I'm losing this ability, Elena said. Soon I'll see the world exactly the way you do. I'll lose my connection to the universal energy that my people live within. David felt terrible. Elena, maybe you should go back. Maybe this is too much to ask of you. Elena took his face in her hands and looked directly into his eyes. David, listen to me carefully. What I'm losing is a kind of cosmic awareness. That made me feel connected to everything in the universe. But what I'm gaining is something my people never experience. I'm learning to feel deeply connected to one person, and that connection, this love we're building together, is more meaningful to me than anything I've ever experienced. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was filled with certainty. My people see the connections between all things, but they don't feel them. They understand love as a concept, but they don't experience it as an emotion. I used to know everything, but I never truly cared about anything. Now I care about you more than I care about the entire universe. That's not a loss, David. That's the most beautiful gift I could ever receive. David looked at this incredible being who had given up immortality to love him, and he realized that his answer had been clear from the moment she first told him the truth. Elena, he said, his voice shaking with emotion, I don't want you to go back. I want you to stay, not because I need you to take care of me, but because I love you too. I love you enough to share a human lifetime with you, whatever that brings. Elena smiled. And David could see both her fading otherworldly nature and her growing humanity in that smile. "Then we'll face whatever comes next together," she said. As to beings who found each other across impossible distances and chose love over everything else, that night, for the first time, Elena slept in David's bed, not as his mysterious caretaker, but as his partner in a love story that had begun among the stars and would continue on Earth for the rest of their human lives. 6 months had passed since Elena revealed her true nature to David, and their life together had settled into something that felt surprisingly normal. Elena was now completely human in every way that mattered. She woke up tired some mornings, complained about rainy weather, and had developed a serious addiction to chocolate ice cream. "I can't believe I lived for centuries without knowing how amazing this tastes," Elena said one evening, eating ice cream straight from the container while they watched a movie together. David laughed, wrapping his arm around her on the couch. "Welcome to being human. We have a lot of weaknesses, but we also have some pretty great discoveries." Elena had adapted to human life faster than either of them expected. She had learned to drive, gotten a social security number through some mysterious paperwork that David decided not to, questioned it deeply, and even found a job at a local bookstore. Her otherworldly intuition about people made her excellent at recommending books to customers. "It's strange," Elena had told David after her first week of work. "I used to know everything about the universe, but now I'm learning something new every single day. I like this better." Their relationship had grown stronger as Elena became more human. She was no longer the perfect caretaker who anticipated his every need. Instead, she was his partner, with her own opinions, dreams, and occasional bad moods. David discovered he loved this version of Elena even more than the mysterious being who had first answered his call for companionship. But their happiness was tested one Tuesday morning when David's ex-wife knocked on his front door. "Hello, David," Lisa said when he opened the door. She looked exactly the same as when she had left, blonde hair perfectly styled, expensive clothes, confident smile. "I hope you don't mind me stopping by unannounced." David felt his stomach drop. He hadn't spoken to Lisa in over a year, not since their divorce was finalized. "What are you doing here?" "I made a mistake," Lisa said, stepping closer. "Leaving you was the biggest error of my life. I've been thinking about it for months, and I want to try again. I want to come home." Elena appeared in the hallway behind David, and David saw Lisa's eyes widen with surprise. "Oh," Lisa said, her confident expression faltering. "I didn't realize you were seeing someone." David felt Elena's hand slip into his, and he was amazed by how natural it felt to introduce her. "Lisa, this is Elena. Elena, this is Lisa, my ex-wife." Elena stepped forward with a polite smile, but David could see something protective in her eyes that was completely, wonderfully human. "It's nice to meet you," Elena said, though her tone suggested it wasn't particularly nice at all. Lisa looked between David and Elena, clearly trying to figure out the situation. "David, could we talk privately? I think there are things we need to discuss." David felt Elena's hand tighten slightly in his, and he realized this was the first real test of their relationship. A year ago, he might have been tempted by Lisa's offer. The familiar comfort of his old life might have seemed appealing compared to the unknown future with Elena. But looking at Lisa now, David felt nothing except mild curiosity about why she had come back, the loneliness and desperation that had defined him after their divorce were completely gone. Elena had helped him heal not just from the divorce, but from a much deeper loneliness he hadn't even realized he was carrying. "Lisa, I appreciate you coming here," David said gently, "but I'm not the same person I was when we were married. Elena and I are building a life together, and I'm happier than I've ever been." Lisa's face showed a mixture of shock and hurt. "David, we have history together. We build a life. Once. Don't you think that means something?" "It does mean something," David replied. "It means I learned what I was missing, and I found it with Elena after Lisa left." David and Elena sat in their kitchen, processing what had just happened. "Are you okay?" Elena asked, studying his face carefully. "I'm perfect," David said. And he meant it completely. A year ago, I might have been tempted by the idea of going back to something familiar. But Elena, what we have isn't just better than what I had before. It's better than anything I ever imagined was possible. Elena smiled, and David could see both relief and pride in her expression. I was prepared to fight for you, she admitted, which is apparently a very human response to someone threatening your relationship. You don't have to fight for me, David said, pulling her close. I chose you when you were still otherworldly and perfect. I'm certainly not going to stop choosing you now that you're human, and even more perfect to me. 1 year after Elena's transformation was complete, David asked her to marry him. He proposed in their backyard, in the same spot where she had shown him how she used to see the world through cosmic awareness. I can't see the universal connections anymore, Elena said, as they stood together under the stars. But I can see something my people never could. I can see how the people can create their own universe together. Their wedding was small and simple. Elena had made friends at the bookstore who came to celebrate with them. David's sister was there, crying happy tears and telling everyone who would listen that she had never seen her brother so genuinely joyful. Even their elderly neighbor, Mrs. Chen, attended and declared it the most beautiful wedding she had ever witnessed. During their first dance, Elena whispered in David's ear, "You know what the strangest part of becoming human is?" "What?" David asked, spinning her gently. "I used to know everything about the universe, but I never understood what home meant. Now I know that home isn't a place or even a world. Home is wherever you are." 2 years later, they were still discovering new things about human life together. Elena had started taking art classes and discovered she had a talent for painting landscapes that somehow captured more beauty than seemed possible. David had started writing, inspired by Elena's stories about her original world and their unusual love story. "Do you ever miss it?" David asked one evening as they sat on their back porch, watching the sunset. "Your old life, your abilities, your people?" Elena considered the question seriously, as she always did. "I miss the certainty I used to have," she said finally, "when I could perceive universal connections. I never wondered about my purpose or my place in existence." But David, uncertainty turns out to be one of the most beautiful parts of being human. How so? Elena took his hand and looked directly into his eyes. "Because uncertainty means possibility. Every day with you is a new discovery. Every conversation teaches me something about love I didn't know before. Every morning I wake up wondering what joy we'll find together that day. My people live forever, but they never get to experience the excitement of not knowing what comes next." That night, as they lay in bed together, Elena spoke the words that had started their entire journey. "You don't have to sleep alone anymore," she whispered, just as she had in David's dreams before he even knew she was real. "Neither do you," David whispered back, understanding now that loneliness had brought them together. But love would keep them together for whatever time they had. Outside their window, the stars shone just as brightly as they always had. But inside, their home, to beings who had found each other across impossible distances, had created something even more beautiful than cosmic awareness. They had created a love that was entirely human, entirely real, and entirely their own. Elena had given up immortality to be with David, but in return, she had gained something her eternal people could never experience: the precious, fleeting, perfect beauty of a human lifetime shared with someone who chose to love her just as much as she chose to love him. And in the end, that choice had transformed them both into something neither could have been alone: two souls who had called out across the darkness and found their answer in each other.